Morning, Eddie.
Morning.
Quite a bit to catch up on since we saw you last. Firstly, Joe Willock, what's the situation there? Will he be available to play for you again this season?
No, we don't think so. With Joe, we all have decided, medical team Joe, that a period of, I wouldn't say rest, but a period where he strengthens the area around his Achilles would benefit him more. So he went to see a specialist and they said, look, you've got a couple of options here. He could have carried on playing, but I think that the longer term view was taken. Let's get him right for next season. So that's what everyone's working towards.
So he doesn't need an operation?
No. I think that's been made clear to him now on a couple of occasions that surgery would be wouldn't be beneficial to his situation. The Achilles is improving well from the original injury that he had. He's just had a little bit of discomfort in there, but we hope with rest and strengthening that he'll be fine.
He's such an important player for you. How difficult has this season been for him and for you with not being able to pick him, because it's been pretty stop-start, hasn't it?
Yeah, big frustration for Joe. I think he's desperate to play, but most importantly, I think desperate to go into games feeling good with his body, and I think that's a challenge for any player. The game's hard enough, the level's so high that if you're not 100% fit, the game usually finds a way to catch you out, and I think Joe's just been frustrated that he's not felt his normal self when he's played. He's been carrying that issue for a while, and it's just been nagging at the back of his head. So hopefully we can get to the situation where Joe's just concentrating on playing and feeling athletically at his best.
And what about Callum Wilson? Because we've seen he's been doing some training again. Is he now fully fit and available for you?
Well, he's trained very well this week. It's been really good to have him back. The energy that he brings, the quality that he brings, he's trained really well. He's been able to, during the period that he's been out, focus on his legs and his running and his fitness. So he's come back, looking really good. Of course, it was a bicep problem, chest problem with one of the muscles. So anticipate that hopefully he'll be able to hit the ground running and make a difference for us.
He is a player with a strong mentality, but given the rather freak nature of the injury, how tough have the last couple of months been for him? Because like you say, obviously he can run, but it's an upper body injury.
Yeah, and I think Callum's game is very physical, so he's a player that wants to get into those duels and is very strong. That's one of his big strengths. So I think getting confident in those situations has been a big thing for him, and I think that's why this week's been so good.
And Lewis Smiley, is there a decision made on him and his potential involvement in the remainder of the season? Yeah,
the decision made on him again was to look at his long-term future and try and protect him, so we won't see Louis again this season. He's done brilliantly this season, but I think with the back problem that he has, rest is probably the right way for us to go. And even if there was a chance, and there possibly was, if we pushed him to come back, and we took that away very early with his age and thinking about his long-term prospects.
I imagine you'd have rather played again quite soon after the last match, but how have you used the extended break? If the players had some time off, and has it been good for you? Yeah,
they had a couple of days off after the Tottenham game, and I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. When you look at it, I was adamant after the Manchester City game that the break was a really good thing for us. After this game, you're thinking, you want to play straight away because the feeling of the group was so good. But I think we've tried to use the time productively. We've tried to get some good training work into the lads. They're obviously feeling good about themselves, but not lose our rhythm. And I think the danger when you have such a big gap and other teams continue to play is that it might just break up your rhythm of the game, how physically you feel. So we've tried to keep that as consistent as we can.
And lastly, Crystal Palace, your opponents on Wednesday night, they seem to be hitting some pretty good form, a hugely impressive performance and result at Liverpool, and then they scored 5 goals against West Ham at the weekend.
Yeah, 2 very good performances. I have to say that I think that's been coming for them. I think they've been playing well, maybe not getting the results that they deserve, but the last 2 games everything's come together for them in a really good way, and credit to the new manager who's come in and instantly played a new system. And a new system, I think, that gets the best out of the players they have. They've got some very good attackers, as we know, and that gives them a really good platform to express themselves. And I think for us, can't underestimate. This is going to be a really difficult game against a team that are in good form.
Thanks, Rosa. Keith?
Eddie, I know you've mentioned a few of the players who potentially could come back or are missing until the end of the season. There's obviously a few others that have been out for a while, the likes of Nick Pope, Trippier, Mickey Almiron and Joe Linton. Is it a strange situation where you're coming towards the end of the season, there's only a few weeks left, and you could potentially be in a strong position of players coming back in before the summer break?
Yeah, we're trying to get as many players fit to make a difference in the games that we have coming up. I think there's been some misleading stories out there that some players are training and that are close to playing when they're not. So I don't imagine a huge change in our squad for tomorrow's game. But we hope before the end of the season that one or two of those players can come back.
Yeah. So in terms of when you mentioned those, is that the four there that I mentioned, Almiron, Trippier, Pope and Joe Linton? Is there potential for any of those four to play before the end of the season?
Yeah, we hope so. We hope that all four of those players could play. But it's difficult to put a definite date on that because none of them are training with the group at the moment. When we have to see how they look when they do come back.
You've got two forwards right now in Alex Isak and Anthony Gordon who are right at the top of their game, both scoring as well, 32 goals between them. How much confidence does it give you going into these last group of games knowing you've got two players like that at the top end hitting the straps?
Yeah, I think it gives the whole team confidence. I think it filters down when you have your attacking players in form. And I think then when you add Harvey, who's come back from his respective injury in a really good place, and I think he's done really well. Three of them together, and then you add Elliot Anderson, who's also come back from injury, but also looking really good. I think from the attacking side, we've got flexibility and strength within those players, and it's great to see.
How are your two centre halves, Marcels and Botman, following their surgery? How are they dealing with the situation?
I think both players have dealt with it well. They're strong characters. I think Sven's had a little bit of time in Holland, so we haven't seen him for the last week or so. Jamal's been regularly coming into the training ground, so I think both players mentally had to sort of understand their situation and look at the long-term picture. I think it's always difficult when you're a player and you see that long stretch where you won't be available and your whole routine and your whole life changes. Once you get your head around that and then you start working towards your recovery, I think you have a different view on it. So as I say, both really good lads, and they'll do the work that they need to do.
I know the last time we spoke a couple of weeks ago about Sandro, and obviously we didn't know what the situation was then. You said that you were hopeful that any potential FA ban won't be extended beyond August. Do you know, are you any further forward to that? Have you had any update at all? Is there any information that's filtered through?
No, I've had nothing, but we're awaiting news on that.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Andy? Eddie, good to see you. Need to check on your fitness first. There was a post-match interview after Spurs where a tassel at you in the eye. No lasting damage, no?
No lasting damage. I could see perfectly fine, and no black eye, so I was happy with that. Yeah, it was a strange one.
Good to hear. Bruno Guimaraes, you said after the Spurs game you'd had a chat with him in January and he promised you no yellow cards. Obviously he accomplished that and he's been playing out of his skin, so I have to ask you, have you had a similar sort of chat with him to challenge him before the end of the season or not?
I think Bruno is always setting new goals for himself. I think he's very motivated between now and the end of the season to help the team in any way that he can. I think his form has been really good. I think the yellow card situation probably ended up helping his performances because it controlled him in a way and refocused his game maybe in a different way. So I think that was a healthy thing. But he does make the difference, and I think he did make the difference for us against Tottenham with a really good performance, disciplined performance alongside Sean. So yeah, hopefully he can continue that form.
He seems to be developing that reputation of making a difference. In his current form and from what you've seen of him this season, is he one of the best around in his position these days or not?
Well, I think naturally I'm going to say yes to that question. I think he is. I think very few players like him, especially in the position that he plays. I think you can get different kinds of midfielders in that position. Bruno certainly fits the profile of the one that we want in that position, one that can handle the ball in any situation, that can build our attacks. So yeah, I think he's a perfect fit for us.
Just one on a player who's not with you but had an eventful day over the weekend. Yakuba Minte, obviously winning the Dutch Cup final, fantastic. Being sent off with 2 yellow cards within 2 minutes. Have you spoken to him, and what's your general overall view of how he's doing out in Holland? Yeah,
I've been keeping a very close eye on him. That would have been a great day for him despite the sending off. Yeah, I think he's done really well, and I think he's attacked the challenge of going on loan and new league, new teammates, played in the Champions League, prestigious competitions. I think he's done really, really well this year, and I think he can be very proud of his efforts. I've tended not to directly communicate. I find you're better off letting the players concentrate on their own situation and not give them too many distractions. But let's wait and see what happens in his next step.
You mentioned the Champions League there. Obviously, the semi-final lineup is all sorted. PSG against Dortmund in one of them. I know you're not the type of bloke who looks back and reflects too much, but is there just a voice in the back of your mind thinking what could have been, bearing in mind both were in Newcastle's group?
Yeah, I think that wasn't lost on me that those two teams have qualified for the semi-finals, and I think it gives it more credibility to our group, really. Not that it maybe needed it. I think we knew when the draw came out that was as hard as we could get. And we felt during those games that they were the two very, very good teams. So, yeah, of course, I think part of you always goes back and thinks, what if? Things could have been very different. But you have to live with the here and now, and we're very much getting on with our own situation.
And just finally on Palace, obviously you talk about the mini break that the players have had, given them a couple of days off. What sort of impact do you hope that has on your team on the game tomorrow? Well,
I don't think it would be any different, to a normal sort of week-to-week structure. We've tried to keep everything the same. We've tried to give them the same match stimulus that they would have had to try and not break our rhythm. So that's why I was very careful to point out that we've tried to make sure that we're physically where we need to be when the game kicks off.
Thanks, Andy. Jerry?
Morning, Eddie. Would you agree that the next couple of games really, if you're going to be where you potentially can be at the highest position you can be at the end of the season, these you really want to take 3 points from each of them, despite what we saw from Palace against West Ham and how dangerous some teams can be in the bottom third of the league? Yeah,
I think with all the 6 games we have left, I think we're looking to try and win every single one. We said that with 10 games to go. We've made a pretty good fist of the first 4. But that's not in any way being complacent and thinking any game is our right to take. We have to work as hard as we can to generate that momentum. And I think games like Crystal Palace, I think whenever you go there, it's a really difficult game. We found that last year. It was a really tight draw. And I think this will be exactly the same. A team in good form, and we know that we're going to have to be at our best levels to win.
They certainly did you a favour taking 3 points, or taking all the points from West Ham. Would it be fair to say that in qualifying for Europe, the way the table is now, for a second season in a row, given the season you've had, will be just fantastic for the club, the fans, the city, and you?
I think that's what we're looking at. I think we've got ourselves back into a very good position from being quite a long way off. So the recent form's been good. We just have to make sure that nothing derails us at this moment in time, and we stay very strong and focus on the individual game that we have ahead. Give our best to try and win it. That's what we'll do.
What could derail you then at this stage? 6 games left.
Well, I think obviously a couple of bad results, and it swings back the other way, and that can easily happen. That can happen against anybody. The quality of the Premier League is so strong. Wherever you go, any away game, we've got 4 away games out of 6. That's tough in itself. Our away form hasn't been as strong as we want it to be. So we have challenges ahead, and only we can answer them.
It has been said by some managers at this stage of the season that fatigue is going to play a part in the last 6 games. It's only natural, and some people want to talk about it out loud. Some people don't. Is that a word that you're using anywhere at all?
That's not a word I'd ever use really in preparation for a game. Your mind can drift into lots of different ways, and I think we have to be very strong with the players. But I think certainly against Tottenham we didn't look fatigued. Maybe there was a spell in December where we found it tough going with the schedule we had and the injuries that we had at that stage of the season. But I think now we're in a different vein of form. We want to play the games.
Just to go back to the immediate post-match there finally, was that your best performance against Tottenham of the league season so far?
It'd be right up there, yeah, it would be. I think just the way we were clinical with what we wanted to do and how we executed it, I think it was a really good performance from the players. I think it was a really good feel about the team. Psychologically, I thought we were excellent. So, yeah, they're the markers that we want to hit. That's how we want to play.
Thanks, Jerry. Simon at the back.
you've found consistency and something very close to your best form at the moment. And the teams in and around you kind of haven't got that. Because of that, has it readjusted how high you think you might be able to finish and what composition you might be able to get in?
Well, I think the beauty of football, it does go in waves. It's never, you're never stuck in one phase hopefully for too long if it's negative, and you want to stay in the good moment for as long as you possibly can. We're in that at the moment, and that's where you want the games to come thick and fast. So we take nothing for granted, and we know we have to earn everything that we achieve. So I don't think we're reassessing anything. I just think we're taking every game on an individual basis.
That's
Damien, Lee, and then Jordan.
Eddie, Callum's spoken in the past about the healthy competition between he and Alex. Knowing Callum as you do, how frustrating will it have been for him to sit and watch Alex do what he's done, particularly over the last few weeks?
Yeah, I think that there would have been, of course, a big element of frustration for him because he just wants to showcase his talents and what he can do for the team. But I think there will be a lot of, I know there's a lot of respect between the two players, and I know Callum would have been pleased with how Alex has performed for the team and helped the team when he's not been available. But Callum will back himself. I've got no doubt about that. He will think that when he comes back, he can add a different dimension. He can play with Alex as well. I've always said that. And the two of them together make us a lot stronger when they're both fit. So I'm delighted to have Callum back, and already in training he's shown what we've been missing since he's been injured.
When you had your difficult run around the time of the year, you had lots of injuries and big players missing. You've still got lots of injuries and big players missing. Is the difference just confidence, or is it more complex than that?
I think it's a bit more complex than that. As I said earlier, it goes in waves. You feel different in different parts of the season. Now, December, as I said, for us was a tough moment. We had a few difficult games in there, and we never refound our spark. Really, it took us a while to re-find it. And once you do, you've got to cherish that, because that's the thing that makes the difference. And we have that, as I say, at the moment. But I think physically we've looked a lot better in recent weeks. I think we've refound our energy and our best form in terms of our physical output. Our numbers are back to where they were in the early season. So it's all loads of different components go into making a good performance.
Lee?
Eddie, on the European players, what you could get, you obviously celebrate every win in the dressing room. Would you have big celebrations if you did even get into, say, the Europa Conference League this season, going off what happened last year?
I don't really feel we had big celebrations last year. I think it was just game after game after game, and then the season ended. So that's a difficult question for me to answer, really. We're not thinking about celebrations at the moment. We're thinking about points and games, and wherever that takes us, we'll assess at the end of the season.
But would it still be classed as a big prize in your eyes?
I think European football is a big achievement for where we are on our journey at the moment, especially with the season that we've had this year. When you take everything sort of together and you review the season, that would be, for where we were, a big achievement, yes.
Just a quick one on, there's some supporters outside the training ground this morning, come all the way from Australia to stand outside there. Does that underline how important it is to increase the global brand?
It never ceases to amaze me, the support we have from not just here at the training ground, but around the world, when you hear different stories and the impact that the football club can have. It's incredible, and the loyalty that the people around the world show us is amazing. And if there are people from Australia just to stand outside the training ground, that's some devotion to the cause.
Jordan?
For the first time against Spurs, Isak, Gordon and Barnes starting the front three together. Just how dangerous can that front three be?
Well, it was a good start for them, wasn't it? Three individually very good players. Whether they can work in tandem on a regular basis, well, that remains to be seen, and they have to prove that can be the case. I think trying to find a way that they can do that tactically is, of course, what I'm trying to deliver for the group. And it isn't always as easy as maybe you'd think it is, because each player has to be comfortable in his position, and it has to be delivered in a way that they can play at their best levels, and they're psychologically happy to play in that role. So the signs were good against Tottenham, but of course every game's very different.
And was Potter thinking for signing Harvey to look to play Anthony on the right more often?
I think part and parcel of that signing was just to look at the strength of the player and think that he can add depth and strength in that position. Now we were going into a season where we knew we had a load of games and we needed that strength. Harvey's goals were also a huge factor behind the signing, because you just look purely at his numbers and they were incredible last year in a team that had a difficult season. And I think already he's proved in certain moments that those numbers will stay with us. You know, he'll score goals for us if fit and plays enough minutes. Now, unfortunately for us, we've been without Harvey for a long period of the season. That certainly dented our ability to rotate the team, but also we missed a quality player.
Just like Jordan, Craig, Luke and then George.
Morning, Eddie. Since we last saw you, the Spurs game, the coefficient elsewhere means the Champions League this season for you guys, it's probably almost certainly beyond you now. That's one season out of the Champions League next year. You know, there's a lot of noise at the moment around the likes of Alexander Isak, Bruno Guimaraes. You can afford probably one season out of the Champions League with that calibre of player. Can you afford two?
You're looking quite a long way ahead. I don't know. I think that's a difficult question to answer at this moment in time. I'm not really focusing on that. Those players have done, the ones you're talking about, have done really well this season. They're top quality players. I think we need the team to be successful to drive everything forward. I'm not going to sit here and say anything different to that. But the consequences of that's probably not for today.
Yeah. Put in a sort of a different way, how do you look at Gordon, Guimaraes, Anthony Gordon, probably elite level players, Champions League level players. How do you keep them in the club? How do you keep them happy? How do you make them want to be here long term?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it's about keeping them happy. I think it's about just driving the team forward, being ambitious, having big dreams. You know, we want to compete at the very highest level with those players by our side. Of course, we have to keep driving standards. We have to keep progressing as a football club. We can't stand still. So I think that's the bigger thing, really.
Luke?
Good morning. Has Callum Wilson got a point to prove in terms of his future beyond the end of this season?
I think every player has a point to prove every single time they pull the Newcastle shirt on. I don't think Callum Wilson necessarily has a point to prove in terms of his ability, in terms of what he can deliver. I think that's undoubted. We'd love him to stay fit for a long period of time and to be able to execute that on a consistent basis. So sort of a double-edged meaning to my answer, really. I think I want every player to have that burning desire every single game to fulfill their own needs, ambitions. And certainly Callum has a huge ambition still, and he's still very, very, very strong player, and he can make a big difference for us.
I know you're always cagey on talking about players who are out injured in terms of return day, but is Nick Pope going to have enough time to come back for club to prove that he should go to the Euros for his country in the summer?
It's difficult for me to answer because he's not training with us at the moment, so he's on the final stages of his work with physios, goalkeeper coaches, sort of in a controlled way. Of course, when he comes back into training with us, everything becomes uncontrolled, and that's the next step for him. I mean, we are running out of time in terms of the season because the games will go very, very quickly for him. But he's looking good at the moment. He certainly, of course, when a goalkeeper gets that type of injury, there's psychological barriers you have to overcome naturally because it's such an important part of your body, and you have to start to feel normal in your reflexes and your actions. He's certainly looking a lot better at the moment.
There's been rumours on the wonderful world of social media that there's an agreement close for Dan Ashworth with Manchester United. Have you heard anything along those lines?
You're asking the wrong person. I'm excluded from those talks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, George?
Hi, Eddie.
Hi.
Spurs was obviously a brilliant performance and result. It was a very different way of playing for you in the sense that didn't have a lot of the ball, which is not the way your teams tend to play. Was that a blueprint, or was it sort of more of an exception?
I always say that we have principles that we don't change. And that game, we didn't see any principles change. We just saw a moulding of a game plan really around, for that individual game, but we did very similar for Wolves. So it's not exclusive to one game. We will always try and attack the game as we see best to try and win it, but without sacrificing certain principles which we think are key. I thought it was a really, really good performance without the majority of the ball, as you say, but I think that was slightly swayed by the last part of the game where we were unable to make big changes to our team. There's a little bit of fatigue and we let them have the ball, and I think that swayed the numbers slightly.
Okay, Dominic? Touched on the resting of Lewis Miley and Joe Willock. Is the return of Elliot Anderson and the impact he's made been a factor in that decision at all in terms of the starting 11?
No, it's always about what's best for the individual player. Now, I'd love both Louis and Joe Willock available personally, but we have to make the best decision for their careers. So it's got nothing to do with anyone else.
Okay, and you touched on Yankuba Minte before. Feyenoord obviously keen to keep hold of him. Do you envisage he'll have any part of your pre-season plans at all?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. As I sit here now, we have to make decisions in the summer on a number of players, and he will be one of those.
Okay, Kieran?
I think the higher you finish, the bigger the merit payment you get. Is that another incentive as well as getting to your, given with financial restrictions?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. I've been asked over the years this question a lot. You can never focus on that side of it. I get the question. Of course, the motivation for me, firstly, is just from a football perspective. We want to finish as high as we can, and then, of course, there's benefits for that for the football club. But we will endeavour to finish as high as we can.
There's been a lot of talk about Callum Wilson's future in recent months. I mean, given the cost it would be to replace a player like that, it's not easy, is it? Is that a big factor for you, that as much as you may have to trade, they're key players you want to keep as well?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because I think it's undoubted how I feel about Callum, how I feel about his qualities, what he can offer the team. And if you lose a player, for example, of that quality, then to find a player of equal standard will cost the club a lot of money. So that's always a big talking point about any business we do in the summer. It's always about two things. If you lose a player, then how can you replace the same quality with financial fair play implications around the corner? So yeah, a lot to think about.
Okay, Martin?
Just on Anthony, Eddie, is he a better player than you thought when you signed him? And does his form merit a place in the Euros with England?
I think that's yeah, I've got to think long and hard about my answer there, because when we signed him, Anthony's now a different player from the player that we signed. So I always say, and I say this to a lot of the players, because they instantly want to play and hit the ground running, that you have to go, sometimes you have to go through a process to become the player that you want to be. You've got to put the work in, and that's where I have to give Anthony so much credit for the work that he has put in. So he hasn't just landed here and become that player. He's had to, and he's still working. He's still, you've seen the last 10 days how hard he's worked to continue to improve his game. So he can force his way into potentially the Euro squad. He can continue to develop his career at the speed that he has. So that's for Gareth to decide. That's not for me to decide. But he's certainly doing everything right as far as I can see.
And is there a ceiling for him? And how hungry is he?
I think you'll struggle to find a hungrier player in terms of his ambitions and what he wants to achieve. And I think he knows how quick his time will go, and it goes for all of us at the same speed. Year after year, it seems to vanish, and suddenly you can be 22 one minute and 27, 28 the next. So you've got to grasp it. And he's doing everything right as far as I can see, again, in terms of his conduct, in terms of how he's working behind the scenes. He wants to become the very best player that he can.
And what is it you ask of new signings? Is it the fitness, the mentality? What is that process they have to go through?
I think it's everything. It's just working at their game. It's every player will have different strengths, different weaknesses, different things to work on. Anthony had a few things that he needed to understand. But probably most importantly for him was just how the team played and how it functioned, what was required of him. That takes a little bit of time because it's different for every manager. But once he got his head around that and began to become ingrained in our work, then I think he improved very quickly.